Hi, in this session we arrive at the sixth chapter of Graham Simpson's book, A Student's Guide to New Testament Greek. In this chapter, we're going to look at the Second Aorist Tense and the Hemera type First Declension Feminine Noun. Let us look at the Second Aorist Tense, how it works in Greek language. In chapter 5, we have learned that the aorist tense of luo is elusa. This is the regular type of aorist tense, and it is called the First Aorist Tense. The normal characteristics of the First Aorist are: number 1, augment at the beginning of the stem, sigma at the end of the stem, and endings which have the characteristic letter alpha except in the third person singular. We already know these. Some verbs have a different type of aorist and they are called the second aorist. Such a verb is heurisco, which means I find, whose aorist tense is as follows: heuron, heures, heuren, heuromen, heurete, heuron. The main characteristic of the second aorist are: number 1, all verbs with a second aorist are irregular in their stems. There is no rule by which to work out that the aorist stem of heurisco is heur. This applies to all verbs with the second aorist tense. Secondly, the second aorist stem is not characterized by sigma at the end. A few second aorist verbs, for example, pipto, do have a sigma at the end of the stem, but this is coincidental. Thirdly, the second aorist tense are the same as the imperfect endings, but the second aorist must not be translated as an imperfect. It has the normal aorist meaning, which is simple past tense. Now we are going to look at the following table, which is a list of irregular verbs which have a second aorist. First 3 in the list are the irregular verbs which we learnt in chapter 3. The rest 7 are verbs from this chapter's vocabulary, and we will see an elaborate table where we find how it appears in its present form, how it appears in its future form, and how it appears in its aorist form. Here is the table. We find heurisco in present tense will appear as heureso in future tense, and in aorist tense it will appear as heuron. Echo in future tense will appear as hexo, and in aorist tense will appear as eskon. Phero in future tense will appear as oiso, and in aorist tense will appear as enekon. Argo, which is a vocabulary from this 6th chapter, In its future form, it will appear as akso, and in aorist tense, it will appear as egagon. Erchomai doesn't have a future form. Did you notice that? But in aorist tense, it will appear as elton, which has no match at all. Esthio again has no future form, but in aorist tense, it will appear as ephagon. Lambano, no future. In aorist tense, elabon. Lego has no future form. In aorist tense, it is eipon. Pino, no future form. In aorist form, it is epion. Pipto has no future form, but in aorist tense, it will appear as epeson. Let us look at another table. In this table, we have an addition of the imperfect tense as well. So we have present tense, future tense, imperfect tense, and aorist tense. Let us go one by one to see how these irregular verbs appear in different forms. Heurisco, in future, heureso, imperfect, heurisco with a eta being replaced in place of epsilon, and in aorist, heuron. Echo, in future, hexo, in imperfect, eikon, in aorist, eskon. Pharaoh, in future, oiso, imperfect, apheron, in aorist, enekgon. Ago, in future, axo, in imperfect, egon, in aorist, egagon. Erchomai, no future, no imperfect. In aorist tense, it is elton. Esthio, no future. In imperfect, estion with a eta again, and in aorist tense, ephagon. Lambano, no future. In imperfect tense, elambanon, and in aorist tense, elabon. Lego, no future. In imperfect, elegon, and in aorist tense, eipon. Pino has no future form. In imperfect, it will appear as epinon, and aorist, epion. Pipto has no future form. In imperfect, it will appear as epipton, and in aorist, it will appear as epeson. So did you notice both these tables? I hope you will remember them and memorize them. Ignoring the blank spaces in the previous tables, as well as the present tense of erchomai, we may make these observations. Number one, the endings of the present and future tenses are the same as each other as also in the regular verbs. Secondly, the endings of imperfect and aorist tenses are the same as each other, which does not happen in the regular verbs. Did you notice that? Thirdly, these observations means that our main way of identifying the tenses is the stem, not the ending. All this while we were looking at the endings, but right now we are going to focus on the stem. This rule is easy to apply to the regular verbs because they have regular changes to the stem for each of the different tenses. In the case of second aorist verbs, the imperfect stem is nearly always regular. For example, acorn from echo is a minor exception, but the future and the aorist stems are nearly always irregular. Now we come to the noun. We will look at the Hemera type first declension feminine noun. The declension of Hemera, which means day, is as follow in the table. Nominative singular Hemera, nominative plural Hemerai, vocative singular Hemera, vocative plural Hemerai, accusative singular Hemeran, accusative plural Hemeras, genitive singular Hemeras, genitive plural Hemeron, dative singular Hemera with an iota subscript underneath alpha, dative plural Hemerais. Now, I want you to notice one more thing. The stem of this word Hemer and so the endings of Hemera and other nouns of the Hemera type are as follows: I, an, ice, us, own, ice. Now note one thing. The iota subscript in the dative singular ending. Did you notice that? There is an iota subscript there. Now, there's one more thing that I want you to notice. The plural endings of this type of noun are the same as that of the plural endings of the archetype nouns. All first declension nouns, the archetype, the Hemera type, and several other types have the same plural endings. Just keep that in your memory system. But in the singular, Hemera has alpha throughout, whereas Arche has eta. Now I want you to look at the table right now. I have put the archetype plural noun and how it appears in all these cases, and the Hemera type plural noun and how it appears in all these cases. So these are the nominative, vocative, accusative, genitive, dative, plural cases. Okay. Now you see the similarity. Archai, Hemerai. Archai, Hemerai. Archas, Hemeras. Archon, Hemeron. Archais, Archais. We come to one more important aspect of this chapter, which is the prepositions. Now we have already learned what is preposition. A preposition is used in front of a noun or pronoun in what is called a prepositional phrase. Here are some examples with the preposition in italics. On the table, after the meal, with him, near the temple, through the fields, in the bus. Some English prepositions are not normally translated by a preposition in Greek, but are translated by one of the case endings, as we have seen. For example, the preposition of is translated by the genitive case without a separate Greek word which means the same. But there are also many Greek prepositions as well, and we begin to learn them now. Greek prepositions are followed by a word, usually a noun, in the accusative or genitive or dative case. As we come to the end of our learning in this session, I just want to conclude with an example. Look at this example. This sentence, as I read, it says, ten karan hures en tais epa geliais tu yuang geliu, there's a comma, petre. How do we translate this? Now, on the top box, you will find that I have defined what is en tais means. En plus dative. Now you will find that tais is in dative case. En plus dative equals to in. So when we have en tais, we will have in the. As we translate the sentence, it will translate as Peter, because Peter is in vocative case. Did you notice that? And there is a comma before Peter. So Peter, you found joy in the promise of the gospel. Epageliais is a vocabulary from this chapter, means the promise, and which is in dative case. And en plus dative case is in the promise. That's where we conclude our session.